Hi, and welcome to my Tuesday vlog. A lot of folks around here want to talk about ICE and other law enforcement officers in the United States, and they like to call them Nazis or Gestapo, secret police like Hitler's gangs of thugs. But as a teacher and an amateur historian, and having written multiple research reports on this topic, I want to talk to you about the root of the problem, and it is us. You see, today's white nationalists or Christian nationalists, they're the same thing. They don't want to believe they're the same thing, but they're the same thing. Do not take their playbook from the Nazis. On the contrary, the Nazis took their Nuremberg laws straight from our playbook, from the slave codes, the black codes, and Jim Crow laws. So let's talk about that. And you might ask, why are you talking about this? Isn't this a moving to France channel? You're decluttering, you're dreaming, you're departing, you're moving to France to start a new life and a better life. Yes, it absolutely is a moving to France channel. And part of the reason we are moving sooner than retirement is what I'm talking about. It is my lifelong dream. However, I don't want to move to France and find that the same things that are happening here in the US right now are being pushed and promoted by the far right in France. Talking over my glasses like a teacher, like my librarian when I was in school. She'd look over her horn-rimmed glasses. See, now, Kristen. The press in the EU can be just as rage baity as the press here in the US. And I want to talk about this. I want the EU, and France in particular, to take a lesson from us in the US and not go down the slippery slope that is that path. Also, yes, this isn't the main reason that we're leaving the US, but I'd be lying if it wasn't creating an urgency for us to do it sooner. So as I said, a lot of people around here want to call ICE and the federal law enforcement who's out there harassing people in our cities, mostly our democratic cities. Let's get this right. This is retaliation from Donald Trump because the Minnesotans and the Oregonians and some of these other states didn't comply and vote for him. Anyway, a lot of people around here want to talk about these federal agents as if they are the Gestapo or they're Nazis, secret police like Hitler's gangs were. When we use foreign terms like that regarding our own nation's violence, we find it easier to turn a blind eye to the fact that it is our history, not German history, that brought us to this point. It helps us to distance ourselves, to not acknowledge our own history and our own culpability, our own blame. As white people, it enables us to put aside the discomfort that we might feel and our responsibility to confront our own systemic racism right here in this country. Racism and classism that is built into our government, our laws, and our institutions. So this video isn't just for Americans. Many people in France and other places in Europe have written to me privately to ask what's going on in the US. It is a call to Europeans to please remember and think about what's going on here, what has gone on here in the US and the rest of the world for centuries, and not return to the same ways, the ways of right-wing, oppressive, authoritarian, anti-immigration thinking that brought us to this place. Did you know that's one of the biggest signs, that is the biggest sign, that a country is returning to right-wing ideology, bigoted, racist, authoritarian ideology, when a group begins to other another group? Who are these people? Largely, they're people of color, immigrants, or those who believe other religions that are not yours. So all of the anti-immigrant sentiments that are proclaimed in Europe, in the US, all of these anti-immigration thoughts and processes that happen and that begin to happen precede authoritarian right-wing suppression. Immigrants are to blame. They're the scapegoat. They're the others. All of the anti-immigration stuff that's proclaimed by the press and the government, shouted about by journalists, I put journalist in air quotes in my brain, and right-wing public officials in France and other parts of Europe, has the potential to swing to the far-right authoritarian government craziness and pure evil that the US government is currently committing. When you see someone on the news or in politics blaming all of your country's problems on those others, you're going down the wrong road. One that has been gone down over and over since the beginning of humanity. And it continues to repeat itself because people fear what they don't know. And they use these others as scapegoats for the atrocities that they commit. Not such a funny video, huh? today. Guess we can't always be funny or joyful or silly. I want to tell you a little story. The last year that I taught high school was just a couple years ago, and I was getting ready to teach Beowulf, that big epic poem. And one of my in advance assignments was just an oral question and answer session with the class. One of the questions was something like, if your government's leaders called for a war against people they were threatened by, would you fight? One student who definitely leaned MAGA, that's the Make America Great Again crowd for those of you who aren't sure what that is, it's the Trump bunch. He said, well, yeah, we fought for our freedom before, we can do it again. I didn't need to reply to that. A black student who'd grown up with him, they'd known each other since kindergarten. She had seen him change from a silly playmate to a far-right, influenced, loud, angry person. She pointed her finger at him and said, and whose freedoms were those, white boy? He sputtered, sneezed a couple times, coughed a little bit, but then he kind of looked down at his desk and muttered, okay, that's fair. And then he grew quiet. Just that one question by her made him realize whose freedom was he really talking about having been fought for before? So these two kids were raised in very similar rural environments, but I venture a guess that when each one of them heard the last words of our national anthem, the land of the free and the home of the brave, well, I'm sure it hit different. So today, I'm going into teacher mode. I hope you don't mind. I'm a consummate teacher. It doesn't matter how old I get or how long it's been since I've been in a classroom. I am a teacher. I have been by nature since birth. I want to learn stuff, and then I want to teach what I've learned to everybody else because I'm so excited about it. I have been a teacher and a mental health professional for many years prior to switching to a more creative arts side of things. I've also been a history buff. Anyway, much of the history that I have centered on are times in world history when the majority in privileged groups created a scapegoat, an other, to blame for their own ills. I'm not going to talk about all of that. I mean, it's a whole world history class. None of us have time for that. So, in light of what our federal government is doing today, I want to talk about the parallels of what's going on today. The tactics that our federal government is using to try to establish their authoritarianism. 12 people have been shot and badly injured, 4 of them murdered by ICE since September. Sadly, as a white woman who knows about the multitude of people of color who have been murdered and executed by law enforcement before them, it took 2 white people being murdered for the country as a whole to begin to open their eyes and see what's been happening long before Donald Trump came into being, long before he went down that damn escalator. He's just a disgusting and evil symptom of the resurgence of white nationalism in the US. So let's take a look at the parallels that I talked about in my opening comments. I'm going to compare a few of the things that were happening during the slavery and Jim Crow era, the Nazi Party's Nuremberg laws, and our current federal government's behaviors and statements. See if you catch any similarities. Okay, let's talk about citizenship. During the Jim Crow era, just a little tiny prelude, when slave laws and slave codes were made, and then the Civil War effectively ended slavery, sort of, the slave laws just became the black laws, the black codes. And that was what influenced the Jim Crow laws. So, citizenship to begin. During the Jim Crow era, our government denied Native Americans, Black people, and our colonized territories citizenship rights, or they severely limited those rights. They disenfranchised Black people who wanted to vote by using poll taxes that nobody could afford and making them take literacy tests. They knew this would work because they had denied slaves the right to be educated. I'm going to share a picture with you and a quote of something that, or probably over here, of something that Frederick Douglass said when he wrote about escaping slavery and becoming an abolitionist. He wrote, and I'm going to turn so I can read the quote, "I now understood what had been to me a most perplexing difficulty, to wit, the white man's power to enslave the Black man. Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave." His master's words made Douglass realize that education would help him to become free. Okay, now let's look at the Nazis and citizenship. The Nazis took citizenship rights away from Jewish people via the Reich citizenship law and made them subjects of the state. They required them to carry papers with them wherever they went so that they could be tracked. Now let's look at modern US ICE and federal agents and our federal government. They have abducted people who were literally waiting in line to be sworn into American citizenship. They had done all the right things to gain citizenship, and yet ICE abducted them right there in the line. and sent them to detention centers. They require people to show ID, though our law prohibits this, and they will beat them if they don't. They have been breaking into people's homes, a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment, without warrants, without knowledge of anyone who lives there except that they're brown. They have been allowed by our Supreme Court, mainly the men, release the Epstein files, to racially profile and kidnap people off the streets just because of the color of their skin. Citizenship. They've also abducted and sent American citizens to detention centers. All right, let's move on to legal segregation. During Jim Crow and during the Black Codes, enforced by the state, they were forced to be in separate schools. You know, they said separate but equal, but they were not equal. They had to take separate transportation or ride separately in the back of transportation. Black people had to drink from different water fountains, had to use different bathrooms. They were denied access to restaurants, to lunch counters, to all of those things. And this is recent history, mind you. This is all the way through recent history. So all of these things, they were denied the right to be near or around white people in many states. Now, a lot of people think it must just be those southern states, right? I'm going to show you a map of what these states are. So let me tell you about this little map. Okay, this is a map of the percent of slaves in 1860 by county. Now, if you'll look up in the north part of this map, even Missouri and parts of another state nearby, maybe Nebraska, I think. But it went all the way up there. See up there? All those places that we now consider bastions of liberalism, it went far above the South. So less than 10% of slaves lived in the yellow blocks. 11 to 26% of the people living in the orange blocks were slaves. 27 to 65% of the people living in the red blocks were slaves. And then 66 to 100% of the people living in the blue blocks. Now, it's not likely to be 100%, a whole county, 100% slaves, but 66% and over were slaves. So in the blue blocks, the slaves outnumbered the masters or the white people. People in all of these places were denied equality, equal rights. They were segregated. The Nazis, also enforced by national decrees. Here in America, the Jim Crow was state by state, most states following Virginia's lead. But the Nazis enforced decrees from the government. For example, Jews were banned from public places. Their businesses were boycotted and vandalized. Jews forbidden signs appeared on other businesses. People would paint big yellow stars on the businesses of Jewish people so that they could let other people know where the Jews worked and what their businesses were. The government stirred up the people who ended up becoming the bullies of the Jewish people. Now, legal segregation today, you don't think it happens? Current government has disallowed DEI programs. That just means diversity, equity, and inclusion, giving people an equal footing. They have created new registration requirements. Beginning April 11th, 2025, the Department of Homeland Security implemented a policy requiring non-citizens 14 and older to register and be fingerprinted. They must carry papers. Non-citizens 18 and older subjected to this registration must carry proof of their registration on their person at all times. Failure to carry this document can result in a misdemeanor charge, fines up to $5,000, and up to 30 days in jail. Though lately they aren't even doing that. They're just snatching them up, and regardless of whether they have papers or they're U.S. citizens. So there are parallels here, people. We didn't get this from the Nazis. We got it from ourselves. Let's look at purity laws. You know, I said somewhere that the Nazis actually used our Jim Crow laws to create their Nuremberg laws. It wasn't the other way around. Purity laws. During Jim Crow, anti-miscegenation laws, that's a hard word, criminalized interracial marriage. They had a one-drop rule, which was a social and legal principle in the United States that any person who had even one way back ancestor of African Black ancestry, one drop of Black blood, is considered Black. Nazis looked at that law and thought, that's a little much because all of us probably have one drop of Jewish blood back there somewhere. The law for protection of German blood forbade Jewish Aryan marriage. So it was more of a three-quarters rule for them. If they had three grandparents out of four who were Aryan, but one out of four was Jewish, they were considered Jewish, which is ironic considering that Adolf Hitler himself was a quarter Jew. Today's Christian white nationalists always and often promote heteronormativity and patriarchy as being divinely sanctioned. So, people of mixed race, LGBTQ plus people, any women who step outside of the traditional roles of wife and mother, even though right now they're letting the women do the things they want. That's what they want. It's in Project 2025. It's in the Christian Nationalist Playbook. It's ironic that J.D. Vance, our current vice president, parrots these beliefs thanks to Peter Thiel. You know, the guy who also came from South Africa and was an apartheid guy and now is the driving money force behind J.D. Vance and some of the conservative Republicans we have here. So J.D. Vance parrots this stuff all the time. And ironically, he's married to a woman of Indian descent and has mixed race children, apparently a fourth one on the way. Moving on, let's look at ideologies. Do you see the comparisons here? Do you see what's happening to America again? We don't want that to happen in Europe again. Those of us fighting here in America right now don't want that to start to happen in Europe again. Stop blaming immigrants for all of your ills. Stop letting the government and your journalists get you thinking that immigrants are the problems. Off my soapbox. Let's look at ideology. In the Jim Crow era, and, you know, they were racist against everybody that wasn't white. White supremacy and the divine right were justifications for slavery. They used the Bible, still do, to justify enslaving other people because slavery was in the Bible too. They justified slavery. They justified Native American genocide. Non-white people were considered savages or animals to be ruled over, forced to convert to Christianity. Eugenics programs, even into the 1970s, were used to justify sterilization of women and girls. The most recent one was, I think, 1973, and it was right here in North Carolina. A young girl was raped, and she was sterilized because she was noted as promiscuous. And it was not her choice. It was not her will for this to happen. This happened everywhere. Let's look at the Nazi era. Racial, Aryan superiority, and eugenics programs as well. They used eugenics as justification for the genocide of millions of Jews, multiple other groups. Jews were the primary target, but also disabled people, Romani gypsies or Romani people, Slavic peoples like from Poland and those areas, Black people, any dissidents, people who helped anybody else escape the gas chambers. All of these people were considered other. They were less than. They believed that they had racial purity. Now let's look at today's modern Christian white nationalists. And yes, I'm combining those two because they're the same. Lots of Christian nationalists might want to tell you that they're not, but yes, they are. Christian nationalism uses religious terminology, but it is more of a political movement than an of Christ movement by a long stretch. It seeks authoritarian control and the preservation of social hierarchies like patriarchy and nativism. This mirrors today how past regimes used this divine mandate to justify slavery, to justify manifest destiny, which was their idea of oppressing minorities and oppressing the natives all the way across the country. Nitty gritty here. Let's look at the violence of these three eras, the violence against the other and their helpers. So Jim Crow prior and now. There were lynchings by mobs of white people. Y'all know what a lynching is, right? Even those of you on the other side of the world. It's when someone is taken and beaten, sometimes shot, often almost always hung by the neck from a tree. Sometimes white people had parties around them, took their children to watch. The destruction of Black communities, especially those that were seen as prosperous, by murder, by burning them out. Do you know the only coup that ever happened in this nation was in Wilmington, North Carolina, when a primarily Black government and prosperous community of people that were both Black and white and other races were mobbed by a mob of white people and murdered and lynched so that they would no longer be in control of Wilmington. There were the Tulsa riots, the Black Wall Street in Tulsa. Durham had a Black Wall Street too, Durham, North Carolina. A very prosperous group of people who had their own banks. They built their own factories. They had their own businesses. And Instead of slaughtering them like other Black Wall Streets around the country, the North Carolina government of white men decided to run a major highway, Highway 147, right through the Black community, right through, right down the middle. Most of those people lost their houses to eminent domain because the highway needed it. And then they lost their ability to buy another house or to own another house because they were priced out. So anywhere that Black people were perceived to be doing well, especially better than some of the white people, any of them were a target. Nazis saw this and they were just like, you know what, we don't really like that they're allowing regular mobs, regular people to make these decisions. So we're going to sanction them. We're going to give them governmental permission to lynch people, to form lynch mobs. Still awful, but I guess they wanted to make sure people knew who was boss. Christian white nationalists. Today's Christian white nationalists have increased violence against minorities using federal law enforcement to do so. Untrained federal law enforcement. All of those people who marched around, called themselves Proud Boys before, or Oath Keepers, they're all in ICE now. This has been happening for decades in waves. And lynchings still happen today. They're just written off as suicides here in North Carolina and elsewhere. The murders of Black and brown people and Native people and Asian people by ICE, other fellow agencies, and by just regular old racists running around. And now murder of white allies. Unfortunately, the murder of white allies in the last few weeks in Minneapolis, Minnesota, have given white people our own George Floyd moment. I'm sorry it took that. Now, many, many, many progressive white people have been allies for a long time, but oftentimes even liberals want to turn a blind eye when it's happening to the other. Now that it's happening to them, they're galvanized and they're like, oh crap, none of us are safe. There are a lot of other things that parallel. Just briefly mentioning one in particular, back in the days of slavery, slaves were forced to wear patches or badges on their clothing that identified them with the plantation that they worked on, that they lived on. If they were not wearing this identification badge, they were allowed to be taken and whipped with 20 lashes before being returned to their master's home, or they could be murdered and the master recompensated for his loss of property. The Nazis borrowed this too. Remember the yellow stars Jews were forced to wear on their clothing? The pink triangles that people perceived as homosexuals were made to wear on their clothing? That's not going on now, though, right? In the US isn't requiring people to wear patches. No, of course not. We have technology now. Today, it's all digital surveillance. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, requires some individual people who are not in detention centers to use a smartphone app called SmartLink. This app requires users to upload photos for facial recognition and tracks their location via GPS, acting as a digital version of the clothing patch. There is a Real ID Act. You know that Real ID that Americans have to get now for their licenses? While this is framed as a security measure, the implementation of Real ID has forced states to become partners in immigration enforcement, turning driver's licenses into a national ID that excludes undocumented people. It excludes them from boarding planes. It excludes them from entering federal buildings. All sorts of fun stuff. Not a patch on their clothing, just Real ID. There are plans in the works to create databases of specific non-citizen communities, populations within the US, such as proposals for a migrant information tracking system, which have been compared to the registries in 1930s Germany to identify Jewish people before further actions were taken. Now, concerning the biometric data and facial recognition, ICE agents can use this app to scan faces while they're in the field, accessing immigration databases to identify individuals instantly. Now, in Minneapolis, they don't seem to be using it because they're just snatching anybody. So while we don't have patches on people's clothes, we have something even more insidious, which is that we're basically being tracked wherever we go. I was going to show you my phone, but my phone is what's filming me. The US's modern day way to track people. And don't think it's just happening here in the US. People have been complaining for a while about cameras on every street corner. In some ways, Nazi America is quite a bit worse than a lot of people think or thought. To close this rather long video, I hope it has been an interesting journey for you because it It's important. It's important that Americans who are both living in Europe or elsewhere in the world or here in the United States, it is important that we know our history and where it came from because we're destined to repeat it and we're in it. Those of you who think that we are heading for an authoritarian government, no, we're in it. Those of you who think we're heading for a civil war, no, we're in it. We're in a civil war right now. It's just taking place using technology and bands of ICE federal agents rather than brothers shooting against each other. Some people think that civil war starts with the first shot, that kind of thing. No, civil war has already been taking place. That's what Christian nationalism wants. That's what Project 2025 is. It's already begun a civil war against civilians. And that has been blown up for us in the last few weeks. If you're not here, I'm sure you're very anxious anyway, because moving abroad does not get rid of the anxiety you feel about the people that are still here and about your country. If you're still here and your anxiety is hitting the roof like mine, and you're feeling the pressure to, oh my God, things are going too slow, I feel you. And those of you who are not United States citizens, who are citizens in the EU or elsewhere in the world, please take note, learn the lesson, and do not allow these right-wing, obnoxious, crazy people to get back into your governments and start harassing people again. Don't do it. Don't let it happen. I guess I'm subversive now, huh? I hope you have learned some things. I do enjoy teaching. I don't enjoy what I had to teach or what I feel like I have to teach, but I want you to know that this is part of my Tuesday is a vlog. It's a video blog. It's me telling you what's going on with my week. And part of what's going on with me in my vlog is dealing with all of the crap that's going on in our country right now while we declutter and dream and try to get out of Dodge. And it's not just that we're running away from here, not at all, but it's a little part. I hope you give this video a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, thumbs down it, whatever. I hope that you comment below your thoughts and feelings. If you are ugly or trolly or bot-like, a jerk face, you won't get responded to and you'll be deleted. But if you truly, I don't mind negative or argumentative or debating comments. Please feel free. If you think that I've got it wrong, please feel free to discuss it, but it will be discussed in a respectful way or not at all. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I was going to say I don't normally go political. This isn't political. This is a matter of ethics and morality and justice. So there is no political stance that I'm trying to support in this. It is a morality that people need to get back to. If you call yourself a follower of Christ and yet you are supporting Christian nationalism, you are in a cult. You are no longer a follower of Christ. Go back and read the Gospels. If you are supporting and being ugly and nasty about immigrants and you're saying, oh, it's okay, they deserve to be beaten up or hurt or thrown in prisons where the conditions are horrific, they deserve everything they're getting because they don't belong here, then you are not a follower of Christ. Just FYI. Anyway, sorry, little mini rant there at the end. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you're able to do something deliberate and enjoyable and creative. And I will see you on Thursday when I'm going to talk about something more fun, which is cultural differences between Toulouse, France and Lyon, France, like food and music and activities and things like that. So I will see you then. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.